Today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Outdoors. The off-season's a great time to rehab your gear, so head on over to Stealth Outdoors at www.stealthoutdoors.com to pick up some climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, or stealth strip rolls for all of your miscellaneous silencing needs. Today's show is also made possible by Hunting Beast Gear, innovators in mobile hunting gear and the designers of the Beast Sticks and Beast Stand. Check out the latest products at www.huntingbeastgear.com. And now, on to the podcast.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Beast Report. This is episode 70. I'm joined here today with Dan Infalt, as usual, and my name is Scott Biskobing. For those of you who caught the show last week, I am, I guess, the new host here for the Beast Report. Got some relatively good feedback last week. Nobody nailed me to the cross just yet, so, but it's the second episode. We'll see.
Give it time.
It's okay. I've got thick skin. But with that said, Dan, welcome back. It's turkey season, isn't it?
Yeah, it's starting up right now.
We had youth seasons that kicked off last weekend, and from what social media looks like, boy, it was quite the weekend. I have been inundated with pictures and just tons of content out there from the youth that hunted. I guess they only get to hunt Saturday and Sunday, but in those 2 days, boy, they really got it done. And then for the rest of us, season A in Wisconsin starts tomorrow, and then throughout the Midwest, I believe Illinois also started this last week here as well. I know it's just kind of popping off right now. We're kind of getting into the meat and potatoes of turkey season. What are your plans?
They're kind of tentative. Eric's got a tag for the first week here, starting tomorrow. But he's going to start out by his house. He lives 2 hours from me. And he says he might come down this weekend. I have a couple birds I've been watching. So if he makes it down, we'll go after him. If not, we won't. Hopefully he gets some footage. I don't have a tag till third week. A couple of spots I had some birds on a pretty good pattern. Youth hunters got in there. My area gets a lot of pressure on the public, and I don't have any private anymore.
What are your thoughts on turkey hunting? I mean, we all know you're the big buck serial killer, and that's where your passion is really at. But when it comes to spring turkey in particular, is there anything you like about it? Is it just something to do? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's fun. It's not as fun as it was when Dave was alive and the boys hunted and stuff. We used to go out in a big group and go chase them around and kill birds every week, and that was fun. I go by myself. It's just something to do. One or two guys, and I don't know. Turkey hunting doesn't seem that special. It doesn't seem like you need to have a lot of skill to kill a good bird. But it is fun. It's something to do at this time of the year. Breaks up the monotony.
Yeah, it's another reason to be out there, and it's a reason to kill something. I know for me, I do enjoy spring turkey season. It's not my first passion by any means, and I've only been doing it now for maybe 16 years now. It was something that my buddy and we just kind of got into. We thought, another reason to get out in the outdoors and hunt something. So we were really super novice about it. Like it wasn't in either one of our families. So we were super self-taught. And then in that, I think it's been extremely enjoyable for us because of that reason, learning the ins and outs. And when we finally got our first turkeys, and it took us several years before we actually did, just because we were overcalling like crazy and too much movement and too much moving around, not as stealthy as we should have been. But there's something about being out there this time of year, if you're not scouting or still shed hunting, something about those first leaves budding on trees and all the birds coming back. It just feels good to be back out there again. And there's a smell to springtime that's different than any other time of the year, I think.
It's the only time of year you carry a shotgun while you're deer scouting.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, it's a double whammy for sure. I can't tell you, we've done some of our best shed hunting during turkey season. That's for sure.
Yeah.
You just happen to come across it. And there's been times where you settle down and you're sitting there and all of a sudden you look over there to your left or your right and there's a shed sitting there that you probably wouldn't have seen if you weren't chasing birds. But
Yeah.
so with that said, yeah, I'm excited. We'll be heading out tomorrow night. I'll be up there for a few days anyways, with one of the guys from the Midwest Racks and Rods crew. And then the following weekend, my brother, Season B, he's got his, so he'll be up there and I'll be following him up and doing some filming of his hunt, barring that he's feeling better. He's a little under the weather here lately, and they're trying to get that figured out, but he absolutely loves getting out there turkey hunting. So, we're going to do everything we possibly can to get him out there. But with that said, we got some other topics. But before we get into the topic at hand, I just noticed today, it's just shortly, maybe an hour or so ago, Deer and Deer Hunting had a post up about that 300-inch buck, and everybody's been sharing it like this. It's supposed to be this update, right?
Yeah.
And there's really no update. The update is that one of the scorers said that something to the effect of a buck of this caliber would never or will never be free range in the state of Wisconsin. So if that tells you anything, they haven't released anything conclusive yet. I guess they convened last night about this. And so that was the big update, is one of the scorers said that it's just,
Yeah.
in this day and
That's
age.
interesting. That's kind of a sad statement. I agree with him that the buck in question is probably not free range. But I do believe that a deer can get that big in Wisconsin free range. I mean, after all, we've got deer that big that have showed up free range in other spots in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And Wisconsin takes more Boone and Crockett bucks per year than any other state in the United States. At least
That's true.
So I don't really agree with his statement that it'll never happen. I do think it is a lot harder now because of trail cameras. It used to be that a deer like that can skate under the radar. Now everybody knows about it, which is why you know that one's a fake. Everybody'd have pictures of it. And because of that, they have a hard time reaching that size range. But they can still do it on private chunks and stuff like that where, and they can still have access to the public, you know what I mean? But I would never say never that a buck could never get that size. They can in Wisconsin. But that is, I still agree with the guy that that's not a free range deer, the one in question.
I agree. I just want to pull up this here real quick. This is one I missed here. Sean chimes in and says, hey guys, just a FYI, if you had plans on hunting southwest Wisconsin, you need to check your spots. Big time logging and mulching going on. Unfortunately, a lot of the forest is gone, and I mean gone. So I'm assuming that's in reference to guys going out turkey hunting down in that area here in the next, throughout the season, I guess.
We're going to probably see a lot of logging with the tariffs going on.
It's true. It's true. Mm-hmm. And that might be exactly what's happening right now. So, topic that we had posted here about, and that's all about chasing a specific or getting after or hunting one specific buck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this kind of spawned off of the Beast Forum. A similar topic was brought up just recently, and as we spoke over the weekend, you're like, yeah, this would be a really good topic to talk about. Mm-hmm. And I fully agree. With that said, how would you like to start? I mean, what are your thoughts? What does it take in your mind to target a specific buck? And then we'll get into some details about some of the, we've selected about 4 different bucks here that you've targeted over the years and you were successful with, and we'll get into some of the details in each one of those. But just generally speaking, what is the starting point for something like that?
Well, first you got to explain it. What is targeting a single buck? Because I think it means different things to different people.
Yeah, sure.
I think a lot of people, when you say, when I say I'm targeting a certain buck, get the idea in their head that you're locked in on that buck and that buck only, which I think is a bizarre statement.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're hunting a buck, say he's 175 inches, he'll be your best buck. You've seen him 4 times, and you decided, you got him on your trail cameras. You're going to target that buck and that buck only. So if a 200-incher walks in, you're not shooting it. Are you targeting that buck? You know what I mean? There's a limit to that with everybody. And I would say I never target a specific buck completely, but there are some that consume me more than others.
Okay.
So generally, I have more than one target buck in a season. I'm targeting more than one animal, and I'm keeping track of multiple animals, and that ups my odds.
Yeah.
But that's not always easy. I mean, if you're hunting a larger class of animal, you have to locate that many animals, right? So that's my definition of targeting a single buck. That buck is, in my target. I'm hunting him on specific hunts. So I'll take a buck and I will figure him out for a property, and figure out where I think he's bedding, what times he's bedding, and stuff like that.
Did you lose your train of thought?
No, it kind of ended abruptly. But,
okay. Have you ever, and we know you're a big public land guy, have you ever hunted private land to try to get after one specific buck because you knew it was there and say you had permission or something like that? Has that ever been the case?
Yes, and there's one hunt that I think everybody will remember, an iconic hunt. Probably the biggest hunt on the Beast. I didn't send you a picture of the buck because I didn't expect you to ask about it. But that would be the buck that Dave ended up shooting, his last buck.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We hunted that buck for years. It was 7 years old when we shot it. But that particular buck, it was hard because Dave had 70 acres and the buck lived on everybody's property.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we had to get him when he came on to Dave's, and it wasn't easy. And when you have a private property that's very open like Dave's was, you have to kind of have set positions for stands because there's only so many places you can have a tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's, a lot of was fields, and you can't sit on the ground in a field, kind of things. So there's that deer, or any deer there, they're real killable when they're 2 years old. They're still a little bit killable when they're 3 on these private parcels like that. But what happens is they become unkillable when they get older for most people because they don't get mobile. They stay in those set positions and they hunt those stands based on camera activity and stuff and wind direction. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of people listening to this that are like that on private land. And a buck like that would come through that property and never go by those stands because he grew up there. They get pushed out when they're 2 years old. When they're a year and a half, they relocate at 2. So when they come into your property, they're a 2-year-old. And as a 2-year-old, when they come into your property and start growing up, they're going to start running around and stuff. Those are the ones that are going to come into your stand and tempt you. Some 2-year-olds around here can be Pope and Young. Mm-hmm. Some of them. But those are the ones that are going to tempt you, and maybe you let them go a year, right? But after a year, they start to learn where your stands are. They smell where you've been. You got to remember your scent. I don't care what anybody says. Your scent stays around your stand and the base of your tree for probably 30 days. That a deer could smell it. Probably, a dog can track it for a few days. Maybe, you know what I mean?
Right.
That stays there. And the more you're active at that stand, the more your scent is there. And if you hunt it 3 times a year, your scent's probably there the whole season. Those deer figure out where those trees are. And as they get to the point where they're 4 or 5 years old, they start avoiding those trees. They started going through and going around without going by those those kill trees. Even if you only hunt them a few times a year, which is what we did at Dave's, we would sit back in observation stands and only move in for kills, and those deer still figure out your trees. Well, this deer was 7, and I got pictures of him through his whole life, trail cam pictures and stuff, sightings of him, and watched him go around you, you know what I mean, just out of range, and picked up one of his sheds. And you just kind of learn where this deer was and how he went, but you try to move a stand or something, and you get one crack, and then you figure out that tree. And what you had to do is kind of be mobile. Now, Dave did end up getting him out of one of the set stands, but when he got him, it was rut, and I had seen the deer the day before moving in mobile, and I actually, it was kind of weird. Actually, it was 2 days before. So I went in on this hunt and went in and set up where I thought that deer was bedding. And as I'm sneaking in there, it's kind of a risky move because that spot is a wind swirl thing. It's like a toilet bowl down there.
Right, like a tunnel. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's bedding in multiple directions, and it's real easy to bust a deer.
Sure.
But it's also, if you get it right, you had to have a kind of a perfect south to southeasterly wind to kind of get in there. So it's pretty rare we hunted it. But when we get in there, if you had the right wind, it would just blow down that tunnel and out of there. And I was trying to go into the wind to that stand, circling way around and sneaking in there. And as I'm getting up to the tree, I see a deer about 20 yards from me walking, and I notice it's a nice 10-point buck. And I could have shot it. But I wanted to get in the tree and get footage and film it, and I didn't realize how big it was. And I started sneaking up the tree, and I actually got all the way up the tree with this deer like 20 yards from me. And I got set up. I know it sounds bizarre, but I did it.
Yeah.
I got the camera on, and as I turned it on, he's walking out of view. And then I kind of got a glimpse of him and realized he was that Big 10. And then I told Dave about it and said to get out there. And he had cancer and he was having a hard time. And he's like,
yeah,
you go after him, Dan. I can't do it. And I was like, dude, I think the thing's going to come through and blah, blah, blah. And it seemed to me like I caught him as he was coming out of his bedding. And he was, kind of, and he was going up over the hill. And I thought he was going to go to one of two places. And one of the spots was over this hill to this corner that was kind of like a tight corner where we had a stand in a tree that we would only hunt every now and then, like once or twice a year. And I came out the next day fully intending to hunt that stand, and I ran into a ton of sign right up in the front of the farm. And it was so much sign that I was like, I can't walk past this. I got to set up. I think, I can go to that spot tomorrow. The wind was going to be the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I walk through there, I blow my scent through the area, So I hunt hot sign when it's hot, basically. So I set up, and I wasn't sure where that other buck was moving. I thought maybe he was going to that stand, So I get in there, and that was the night I shot a nice 10. Nice 10-point came in, and I shot it. Wasn't the real big one, but it was a shooter, so I shot it. Even though we were hunting, like I said before, you have that target buck, but you ain't going to pass one that's a really nice buck, So I shot it, and Dave came out to help with it, and that got him all pumped up. And he's like, "I didn't look at all this sign. I should get out here and hunt." I'm like, "Really, Dave? Really?" I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Go to that stand, man. That buck is coming through there, but I think that stand could be good, And he went to that stand the next day. So this is the third day of that, that we were out there. And that buck come over the hill, and he didn't recognize it. And he just said it was a real good 10, a wide 10 came through. And it would not come by that stand. It knew that was a trap. But we had a little kill plot in front of it. So he stopped up on the hill. He checked it for does, and then he went to leave. And Dave literally took like a 45-yard shot at it, but he drilled it. He shot it in the liver. The deer was walking real slow when he shot, and I think he walked into the arrow into the liver. And as soon as I determined tracking it was a liver shot, I said, we got to back out. We can't go after this deer. So it was a long sleepless night. And the next morning we get in there, and probably most of the people watching, if they saw the video of
Oh
Dave's
yeah,
last buck, it was pretty iconic when we found it. I
it
mean,
was.
he was in tears, and I didn't know it was going to be that buck either. I thought he shot a different buck. Even the video, when I watched the video footage of him shooting it, it was grainy and it was at a long distance that he had the camera always zoom back.
All right.
So it was, I didn't think the buck was that big. I thought it was a good buck. I knew it was bigger than the one I shot, but it didn't even dawn on me that it was the buck that we were after the day he was hunting.
Yeah.
I know that sounds bizarre, but when you chase something like that for 7 years, it's hard to fathom somebody actually kills it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And what month was that?
That was in rut. So,
That was in rut. Okay.
yeah.
Early November ish.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that was his last buck he ever shot alive. So, last one.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, I think most of us have seen that video before, and it's pretty fantastic. And a great buck at that too. I mean, for them to get to that 7-year mark is not something everybody gets to experience, for sure. You know, if they're not targeting a buck of that age class. With that being said, so somewhat smaller property. It was 70 acres, I think you said, right? What was the hunting pressure like around that property? Was there a decent amount, or was it adjacent to public or houses?
It changed. It changed.
Okay.
So for a while, the property to the south of his, nobody hunted, but it was mostly open grass. But it kind of gave some protection on that border. Then at some time period while we were hunting that buck, the guy died and left the property to somebody else who had friends who hunted, and they would set up on our land border right on the fence line. And that affected us quite a bit. And the property to the north, they gave us permission to hunt. They're friends of Dave's, but then they had a relative that hunted in there that had permission. And he set up a blind on Dave's property, and Dave kicked them off the property, so they kicked us off of theirs. And the guys in the back were really heavy pressure at first, and they kept trespassing on Dave's, and Dave went and talked to the landowner, and they were his cousins, and he kicked them off and leased the property to some hunter who was actually a pretty good guy. And that guy only has a couple guys back there, and he only shot big bucks, but he put on some pretty heavy pressure. So the pressure was kind of moderate, but it changed throughout the years. But at least we knew what was going on too. Being private, that's a huge advantage, that you can kind of, if you know your neighbors, know what's going on around you and what gets shot and what don't and stuff. In public, you really never know.
Right. I guess the reason why I ask is if the hunting pressure is really tough, I would, around your property, let's say you got maybe 2 or 3 adjacent properties that are hunted, and you don't really know, but you know that there's guys in there hunting them. You don't know how aggressive they are. You don't know much of anything about them, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would your tactics be in a situation like that versus, you're bumped up against just, more of a suburban area where there's just, some small houses and smaller acreage, and the hunting pressure around isn't as high as it would be if you're surrounded. Let's just take 100 acres, right? And then there's 100 acres to the west, 80 to the east, and then maybe to the north, another 100 acres. And all 3 of those properties are being hunted, fairly heavily. How does that change your tactics on a private piece?
Really,
We'll get into the public stuff too.
The main thing you got to worry about is that your property has less pressure than the neighbors. So, and the less, the better. Mm-hmm. And regardless of how much pressure is on the neighbors. But what deer do is they go to places where there's no pressure or low pressure, right? For instance, in the heaviest pressure times around Dave's, when he had the bad neighbors all the way around, there was a property kitty corner from his that was, I think it was like 20 acres. And the people that own that, um, were anti-hunters. Let nobody hunt on their property. You couldn't even track a deer on their property or look for a shed or anything. If you shot one and ran in there, it was just known you weren't getting it. They were not giving you access. And we would drive by at noon on opening day of gun, and there'd be 2, 3 10-pointers out feeding in the field. You didn't see that anywhere else. And that's my point, is if you make your land like that, the deer will start coming into your property like that.
Yeah.
But everybody thinks they got to hunt it all the time, and they think that their odds are going to go way down by not hunting. When the truth is, not hunting is going to make the hunts that you do make way better. So on Dave's, I always struggled with that with Dave. He had a hard time not hunting and not hunting the farm. It took me a while to get it through to him, and when I did, the hunting got way better. And what we did was we set up stands on the perimeters, and we watched the farm. You could possibly shoot one there. We put a food plot underneath it. Maybe you get a doe, or maybe some buck comes wandering in, because it happens. But mainly you can see. You'd bring binoculars and a spotting scope, and you'd watch the openings, and you could see if a buck slipped through last light or whatever. And we killed a lot of our bucks that way. We'd see one and then move in on it, and kill it. A lot of that's rut, because those deer come through, don't know the property as well, and they walk past those stands that have been in the same spot for years. But we don't hunt those stands very much. I mean, there'd be stands out there that we don't hunt for 3, 4 years. You know what I mean? There'd be some that we hunt 2 or 3 times in a season, but none that we hunted more than that, except for those observation stands. We'd sit back and watch, and not move in until there's a buck on the property. Why get your scent in there for 30 days if there ain't a buck in there? You know what I mean? That's going to come in 15 days and then smell you were there. So we just stay out, let it be pristine, let the deer come in there, and once they're there, then hunt them.
Sure. I'm going to bring this question up here. This is from Ron Brown. If you believe that human scent stays around a tree stand site for at least 30 days, then why would you set foot on public ground?
Because you go to places where there hasn't been anybody in 30 days.
Fair.
Right? I mean, that's what I'm looking for, is those spots off to the side. If you're hunting where other people are hunting, if I see a tree stand set up, or if I see where somebody hunted wrappers, I'm not there. I'm not hunting there. I ain't going to shoot a mature buck there. I am not hunting in those places. I mean, every time I get a mature buck, it's always, not always, but most of the time, it's in a spot that is so overlooked. I've never hunted there before. I figured it out. I'm like, this is where he's hiding. I go in there and I kill him. There's no place on public land where nobody goes, but there are places where people don't go very often.
Okay.
You kind of got to look at that public property as, like if you were hiding on the hunters, where would you hide? But then it should still have the type of habitat that a deer needs, at the bed. And you find those spots where nobody goes, and that's where you kill those bucks.
Do you find that there's any difference in buck behavior, mature buck behavior, between public and private?
Yeah, I do. No, it's not like it's not like they can read signs. It's not like they can read a no trespassing sign or public or private property, right?
Right.
But if you get into like highly managed lands where they just got food plots and they feed them all the time and just got cameras out and watch them and stuff, and they get high numbers of deer. I mean, I got properties like that. I've seen 3 or 4 year old deer, notice you in the tree and just keep grazing and stuff, or you're out doing, scouting the property for a guy, and they'll walk up to you and look at you and walk past. They don't do that on public property. I mean, most of the deer that I shoot on public property are full of projectiles. You skin them out, you find broadheads in their spine, you find wounds in them. They got a limp. Most of them have learned some pretty hard life lessons, where they don't learn those lessons on that managed land as much.
Sure. Makes sense. Well, do you want to start getting into some of these specific deer here?
Sure.
Let's start out with buck number 1. And
so these are my top 4 bucks that I would say I patterned for more than 1 year and killed. That I specifically sought out these deer. So this particular buck right here, that buck, I often refer to him as my mentor. I actually killed him in 1989, but I hunted him for, I think it was 3 or 4 years. I picked up his first shed, was off of a 2-year-old, one side. And then I started getting interest in him with that shed. There wasn't, back in those days, there wasn't many deer where I was hunting that made it to 2. I had shot in a couple of good bucks, 2 or 3-year-olds, but never gotten like a mega buck yet, which is what I would consider this is a very large buck,
Yeah.
I mean, its brow tines were, I think, 11 and 9.5 inches.
I was going to say they look like 12
Yeah.
12-inch brows.
So that buck, the first year I had interest in him. I didn't really hunt hard for him or whatever, but I had interest. The second year, I picked up a shed from him, which would be his when he was 3 years old. And he was a Pope and Young class at 3 and had pretty good long tines and really started getting my interest. And I started looking for him, searching for him. I saw him a couple times during season at that size, but never really had much for chances. But then after picking up that shed, I kind of got really interested, started poking around. And that next year, he grew a pretty nice rack, like high 140s, 150s, something like that, 10-point rack. And then I had really, I had started that spring already learning to, this buck was kind of teaching me. So I was seeing him on hunts, but not getting close enough. And what I learned was, everybody was telling you back in those days to stay away from bedding areas. But I'm watching them in fairly open terrain come out of bedding areas and not get far enough to kill them because you're too far back. And I just learned you had to be closer, and I didn't have a mentor tell me not to. So I kept trying to push the limits. And I ended up getting real close to him and shooting him in the ass with a bow. And fortunately, it didn't hurt him. Ended up seeing him again, so I knew he was okay. I had another chance that same year. I had him walk by me at about 25 yards, and I had no shot.
This was all the same year?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then that year, I picked up both of those sheds, from that buck, and ironically, so that would have been, I got a 2.5-year-old shed, a 3.5-year-old shed, and now both sheds from 4 years old, and they were all found within 75 yards of the same spot. All of those sheds, in a thicket, a real thick, good bedding area. So after that, after seeing the size of those shed antlers and stuff, and having those close calls, and having that hit on them, I had one other hunt that year too, where I had no, that was the next year. Never mind. But so this is a long time ago. Got to remember.
89 was a long time ago.
So that would have been the spring of 89. I went out scouting, and I just said, I got to get out in wintertime. Like when I was looking for these sheds, I'm starting to find some beds and stuff, and starting to think, like where I found all those sheds.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this is a bedding area. He's laying in here losing these antlers and stuff. I started figuring that out. And I knew that every time I got close to where I thought he was coming out of, I got opportunities. If I got right on top of the bedding, but if I got too far back, I wasn't seeing him in daylight. So that spring, I decided to really scour that place and find all those bedding areas. And I did. Okay. And I bounced around trying to hunt them the next fall. And I had one opportunity at the buck in rut. He actually got in a fight with another buck, and I could hear the fight. I couldn't see the deer, but I could hear the fight. And you're going to love what I did, because remember, this is a long time ago. So at the time, I was working for Buckmasters magazine, and they gave me a bunch of tinks. So I took some and I put it in in a film canister.
Yeah.
And I had it in my pocket. And when I heard these bucks fighting, I ran up to a spot where I actually had a wooden platform in a tree. A long time ago, and I hung this out because I was upwind, not completely upwind, but off at an angle. If this deer kind of came in, he'd probably catch wind of the scent. Yeah. So I put this scent out, and I climbed up this tree, and the bucks started. They got done fighting. I could hear them, but I couldn't see them. But they weren't that far away. And after the fighting stopped, and you could tell it was deer. I mean, they don't even sound like people. They're breaking branches and falling over and stuff.
Right.
And he starts walking towards me, and I can hear him coming, but I can't see him. And he gets to this tree line. It's really thick. And he comes through these trees, and he's coming straight for that bottle of scent. And he walks out, and like a dumbass, I just sit there at full draw, kind of waiting for him to stop instead of stopping him or whatever. And he's only at like 10 or 15 yards. And he walks up to that bottle, and I'm thinking he's going to smell the bottle, stop, and give me a shot. And as he gets to the bottle, he just blows up and takes off and snorted through the woods for a mile. He never completely stopped. He just, when he hit my scent by that bottle, he freaked.
Right. So it wasn't the actual tinks itself that spooked him, you don't think?
No, it's the human scent around it.
Yeah.
Not the axis deer pee or whatever's in that crap.
Sure. But for a moment though, it made you a believer though in it though too, didn't it?
Well, I don't think scent doesn't work.
Sure.
I just think that it's going to spook deer more than I've been around the block. It's going to spook more deer than it's going to get you. Now, if you're a novice, if you're like brand new to hunting,
mm-hmm.
sitting in a tree blowing a call or putting scent out might be something for you. It might work. But I think as you get skilled, you're better off staying away from that stuff and using your skills to kill things than to try trickery, because trickery often scares the deer away. And once you know what you're doing, if you can figure the deer out, the chess game is easier than the trick 'em game, in my opinion. So then after that, gun season came along. And I got this bright idea in my head that I was going to take my shotgun and I was going to sneak up to every one of those bedding areas and go in on a crosswind. Because I learned real quick that they're watching downwind. Like when I jump them, they'd be looking at me if I went straight into the wind. They'd be set up for that. So I'd go in from a crosswind and go into these bedding areas I learned and just sneak one step at a time. And generally, a deer would jump up and give you a shot, And I did this the whole week of gun season, which we get 9 days in Wisconsin. And it was getting towards the end, and it was Thanksgiving Day. And I still had some areas in the back that I didn't hit yet. And this deer always seemed to be in one area. He never seemed to leave the area. It's more of a homebody. So he's in like a square mile area. And there's one spot that I hadn't gotten to yet that was it was an open field that had a draw in it that didn't get the field wasn't getting farmed no more, but it only hadn't been farmed for a few years. But there was a draw in that field, a drainage that didn't get farmed at all because it was too narrow and steep. So it just filled up with dogwood and brush. And then the farms back in those days didn't have garbage pickup. Well, before those days, probably like in the 70s or 60s or whatever, didn't have garbage pickup. So they just dumped all their garbage in those ravines. So there's all this crap in this ravine. But when I had scouted in spring going up that ravine, what I noticed was huge rubs in there and beds all up in there and around this garbage. And there was some like old vehicles and stuff in there. And the beds were right up against these vehicles and stuff in this tangle of brush.
Sure.
And it was kind of so thick that if you went in there, the deer could go running out the other side. And if you came in from the other side, they go out the other way. And there was really no way to get close to these things without blowing it unless you did like 2-man or something. And I didn't have anybody to hunt with. So I decided to go up to the head of this ravine, right up to the point of it, and take a rock and throw it at this vehicle that was right in the middle of where all the beds were. This old rusted up car, like 1950s Chevy or something. Yeah. I threw this big rock up, and I think I missed with the first one. I threw another one, and I hit it right in the hood of the the car, and when it hit that hood, all hell broke loose. And that buck jumped up out of there and ran into that field. And out of the excitement, I just started blasting shells, and probably not aiming well enough. And I, at some point, realized I was running out of ammo, and the deer was getting further away. And at the last shot, I concentrated on the shot, and I squeezed, and was pretty sure I missed, because the deer never missed a stride and just went running around the corner. And all I could think was, "Oh, you dumbass! You get a crack and blow it." And I'm reaching through my pocket trying to jam shells into the gun and load it and stuff. And there's just a little bit of snow on the ground. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to run over and get on the track and try to find this thing. And this was Thanksgiving Day. And my mom was like, "You're not going hunting." I'm like, "I got to go. I'll just go for a few hours." And she's like, "You got to be back by noon," and blah, blah, blah. And it was already noon. I get over to where this deer ran around the corner. I'm going to get on this track, and I'm going to try and run down there quick, because he was going into an area where he'd go through some brush, but then he'd probably enter an open area. And if I got up on the top, I might be able to get another shot at him if I sprinted like 40 yards. So I start sprinting over there, and I cross over the pass where that deer was running when I took that last shot. And I just see all this like little tiny pinpricks of blood splattered all over the snow. And I stopped, and it just like, wait a second, I must have hit this thing. And now I'm in a different position because I ran, and I could see kind of around the corner. And I look, and there the thing is laying. It got barely out of sight and crashed. So that was my mentor buck. It was the first deer I killed. But I hunted that deer for 4 years before I killed him.
That had to be extremely rewarding to finally close the deal on a buck like that, for sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And how did Mom take it?
Oh, she was pissed. None of that. I dragged my brothers out to help me, and we had to drag that thing like a mile.
Oh, Mom was slaving over the stove, making Thanksgiving dinner for you guys, and
yeah, he ran down into this, or where it ran down was kind of downhill, mm-hmm. And instead of trying to get a truck up to a road that would probably take us like 100 yards, we just tried dragging it all the way to the house, and it wasn't as easy as we think. It was pretty hard, but we came back all bloody and muddy, and dinner was cold.
Mom was mad.
Yeah, she got over it.
All right, well, let's move on to buck number 2 here. Big non-typical.
Yeah, so that's that one was okay, so in 1990, in the summer, there was a day I couldn't sleep in July, so I went out shining.
Okay.
And I drove up on a field, lit the field up, and that thing was standing about 20 yards from my truck. And it took off running, but it was a sight you would never forget. That rack was huge. Sure. And he ran off, and pretty open area. I went back in there, found his tracks where he was standing. He had a unique track. He had something screwed up on one of his feet, where he had like a backwards hook on one of his toes, on his left foot. So he had a really unique track. And I kind of backtracked that buck through these fields to where he came from, which was a square wood lot that was surrounded by farm fields. And that wood lot was probably 15 acres, pretty small.
Okay.
So I kind of stayed back, but I saw all kinds of trails going in and out of it, and it was really the only place where he was coming from where he could be bedding. And I started watching that and started seeing him come out of there and go back into there in the mornings and evenings shining, getting closer to season. And then the farmer, that was a vegetable farm, the guy gave me permission to hunt on. And the farmer gave permission to a couple other guys. And they saw those tracks too. They were his workers. So they're out working the field, saw those tracks and got permission. And they put up 2 wooden stands on that 15 acres on each corner of that woodlot. And as you can imagine, the buck disappeared. So I had a hard time relocating the buck. Finally did. quite a ways from there on the other side of a road, um, and started hunting them on that side, and
Was that
didn't get
public?
them. Nope, it was private.
Okay.
Started hunting them over there, and there was some public adjacent to it, but the area I was hunting was mostly private. Um, but there was a farm access trail that went back there, and one of the bedding areas I found of his was underneath a willow tree that was in an old pasture that didn't have cows anymore. It just wasn't being used anymore. And the willow tree kind of had an arch, and it was a big tree and kind of had like a rainless spot underneath it. And his bed was right there, and it kind of watched the access. And there was a lot of people that hunted back there, and a lot of people that went back there, and farmer and his kids, and people walking and all kinds of stuff. And this bed just watched that access. And hunting back there was really open. I watched that buck come in and out of that bed quite often on a west wind. And it just drove me nuts because there wasn't a tree anywhere around. You couldn't get close to this. And I kept trying and couldn't. And actually, when I found that bed that spring, I found one of his shed antlers in the bed.
Oh,
And the shed was almost as big as he is when I killed him.
okay.
One side was laying right where he bedded. And he kept bedding that spot, which isn't the norm. Usually bedding a spot for time periods. But the older bucks I start really locking into those places, that are secure. And I kept trying to find a way to kill him. I kept, I knew some other spots where he bedded periodically, but you couldn't hit it right, but he would, I'd be sitting in a spot way back, and if you had binoculars, you could watch him come out right at dark, and he wouldn't get like 50, 75 yards in daylight, and there wasn't a tree around him. How do you get close? So I'd walk up that access trail, and there's like some brush blocking, like a little patch of cattails blocking his access to see the trail at that point. And I'd look at his tracks coming across the like dirt farm road, the dirt,
Yeah.
The field road for the tractors. And I walked about 10, 15 yards in there to see, is there some place I could get in the grass? Is there some way I can, and I'm like, no. And then I moved back, and I went out to hunt. And I watched that deer come out of there like he does every night. And he gets up to that fence, and usually he would just walk by and pay no attention to the human scent on that road. But when I walked 15 yards off that path, he freaked out when he smelled my scent. Kind of shows you, that's one of those key points where you learn that where your scent is really matters. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it ended up going to gun season again. Didn't get him with the bow. And you're going to love this. It got all the way down to Thanksgiving Day. The trouble was the wind, when he would bed there on a west wind, would blow right from that dirt road to that bed. And there's no other way to get at him. So on Thanksgiving Day in the morning, I wasn't intending on hunting because I had been warned. But the wind was switching. The wind started out in the morning, it was west, and it was switching to an off wind. And it was actually going to rotate all the way around to east or southeast or something like that. And I just got this idea in my head that I could get in there. He probably bedded there with that wind. And there really wasn't any place he could shift to, like do a bed shift. He'd have to get up and walk through a wide open pasture. And I'm thinking that is a fatal mistake if I take advantage of it. And I'm thinking he's got to be bedded there. And then I got my shotgun. I went out there, and I got to in line with that bed and kept the cattails between me and that deer. And the cattails were like 20 yards, and it was a real small patch, like the size of a car. Wasn't even
For the cattails?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
And they weren't even very high. They're real low and scattered, but it was enough that it was a blockade there. And I got on my hands and knees at that road, and I crawled up to the cattails, and there's water in there too. It was kind of flooded and
Yeah.
thin ice, and I had to just like real softly break this thin ice as I moved.
Yeah.
And
Makes a bunch of racket.
yeah, I actually bungeed the gun to my back. I did. I did. So I get up to the cattails, and I get the gun off my back, and I'm half thinking this deer ain't going to be there. I can't. I'm 20 yards from this spot, and I pop up, and he's laying there bedded, and I'll never forget that image. His eyes get real big. He looks at me like this. His rack is kind of hidden by that tree, and for a second, it's him that I knew it. I mean, you can see the bases. I knew it was him, but I had that like question in my head. I mean, it's like I couldn't believe that I actually pulled this off.
That you were right.
This is all a split. Yeah, it's all a split second. There's
Yeah.
crap that goes through your head in a millisecond.
Mm-hmm.
And I got the gun on him and shot him right in his bed. He didn't even get up. And the thing of it was, I remember I had this weird thought that came through my head was, I could have did this with my bow. Like I didn't have the balls to do it.
Sure.
Like I didn't think I could get away with crawling up there. You half expect he's going to jump up and run. You're going to have to jump out of these cattails and spray a bullet
Right.
at him or whatever. But he just laid there looking at me like shocked, and I shot him right in his bed.
That's incredible.
That's still to this day the biggest buck I ever shot.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to this guy here again. Somebody had asked a little bit earlier, how often do you actually score your bucks, or have they all been scored?
No, I don't score any of them anymore. I think I got that one scored. It scored mid to high 180s, non-typical. I think it netted 179.
Wow.
I got the first one scored. It was I don't know, somewhere around 160. I thought I got robbed, but
What did Mom say that day?
she wasn't too happy at all. But I say that, but there's always a smirk on her face, like she was like
Right.
like proud, but couldn't say it because I'm supposed to be home.
But you got to stop screwing up Thanksgiving
like
Day dinner.
I love it that you're killing these big bucks, but don't do it on Thanksgiving. It's
Right.
like
Couldn't you have done it yesterday or tomorrow?
right. I always ruined the Thanksgiving dinners. That was
All
my
right.
job.
Now we're going to move on to the Rome legend.
Yeah, that buck was more modern. That was public land by my house. That's a bull kill. That one was living across the highway from a place I hunt quite often. And everybody around town was seeing that buck. He was very showboatish. He came out a lot. And back in that time frame, a lot of people shined, and they would talk, and people would see him shining because it was a more of a highway than a road. And everybody started talking about that buck. Now, the buck was actually living on property where it's managed for hunting, and the people that hunt there manage for big bucks. But it was coming onto the private or the public land quite a bit. But everybody would set up and try to get it where it would come across. It would actually walk right through the parking lot at night and rub all the trees around the parking lot, and everybody would set up right by the parking lot. But I knew that was at night, and what I figured out is that buck was coming over and staying during rut by a group of does. He had a girlfriend over on my side that he liked on the public side. And there was a spot off to the side on the public that really most people overlooked and didn't even really know was public. This is like just before the Onyx craze, so people didn't have an app that showed them everything. And if you walked out following the public land signs, you'd walk right past this little overlooked corner where this thing was. And there was a doe bedding area over there. And I learned that this buck was showing up for a few days right when the rut would kick in, right around the end of October. And I had the 1 year I kind of figured it out without really having any opportunities. But the next year I had a plan. I had it scouted out. I had it kind of figured out, and I had realized that there's a rub line in there that comes out of that backside of that bedding area that would open up with rubs when he's in there, and I would check on that periodically. And the buck would start coming across the street and going back and forth at night and leaving a lot of sign up until then, and that's what got all the locals fired up. He was actually walking up a dirt road access that you can only walk on to get onto the public.
Sure.
And he was actually, it's the only access hunters got. It's like an easement to get back there. And it's a very popular spot. And when he'd walk up this, he was making scrapes every 20, 30 yards and rubbing these big trees right on the access trail. And it caused a lot of attention, got a lot of people hunting over there. And when I went in to kill him the first time, I went in there with a friend, a guy named Brian from the website. And I went one way, he went another way, and I went over where this buck, where I figured he was kind of holing up. And where he was supposed to be bedded was down into this thick stuff that was adjacent to the doe bedding area. But sometimes does would bed further up a little bit, but just a few. And as I'm walking back there and I'm sneaking, a doe jumps up, and he jumps up alongside of her. So the doe had bedded in the wrong spot, like too close to me.
Sure.
Which happens quite a bit when you hunt bedding areas. You go through areas of deer bed. Sometimes you bump deer, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I split them. The buck went one way, or he went one way. The doe went another way. So I kind of got in the middle and set up in a tree, figuring he's going to come back looking for that doe. Like, he ain't going to go far. And sure enough, just before dark, he came creeping back the way he came from. But he stayed to the next transition down, which I was feeling kind of like a dummy, kind of thinking, I should have figured he'd be on the downwind side right on the transition. And he was. He came out and he kept walking that till he got downwind of me and smelled me. And then he took off. And I didn't get another crack that year. But the next year...
How old was he at that time?
I believe he was probably about 5 that year.
Okay.
So I think I shot him when he was about 6, I think. So the next year, I patiently waited while everybody talked about himself. Well, the whole routine started back up, all the coming across the road, going back and forth and all that. And I just patiently waited, monitored that rub line. And when he showed back up and the rub line opened up, I went in for the hunt. And it was Halloween night, October 31st. I went in and the whole parking lot was full. I had to walk under guys on the path going back that were like, and I mean, come on, you're blocking 3,000 acres.
Right.
I mean, come on, I'm going to hunt back there. Sorry. Yeah. So I go back and there was a guy with a decoy in the field. There's a guy over here in a tree. There's a guy over there in a tree. Everywhere there was his sign, which was all night sign,
Sure.
But,
how did you determine, not to interrupt you, but how did you determine that it was all night sign? Just based on what you had been seeing, or
based on the age of the deer and where he beds?
So that and that alone.
Yep, that and that alone. Yeah. So, I mean, just look at it like this: if people just hunted sign and killed big bucks, everybody'd kill a big buck. Every rub you find that's giant, there's a stand over the top of it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's all a matter of getting them where they have that daylight movement, that window of movement. So anyhow,
it's determining when that sign is being made.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, zigzagging back to the spot where I wanted to hunt, I had to get around guys that were hunting probably within 200 yards of that buck's bedding area.
Okay.
And they weren't bothering that buck.
Mm-hmm.
They'll hole up in a little spot where there's no human intrusion. As long as, there's no human intrusion there. They know where those people are. They smell where they are. They move there at night. You know what I mean? That don't bother them. The people are gone. So I loop around. I get in there and I get set up. And I'm watching the bedding area, which is in cattails with a few trees in the cattails where there's a little higher ground out of the water. Everything's surrounded by water except for where he's bedded. And I'm figuring that's where he is. And the doe bedding's to my right. to my left, and I'm looking at him, and the hunters are to my right, and the does come past, straight past me, and the bucks come out in rut. They bed there, and then they monitor the does. When the does come past, they come out.
Mhm.
I got in there, slept up. I was about 75 yards from the beds, and he stood up out of his bed, and I could see him right when he stood up at about 75 yards. I mean, it was thick and stuff, but you could see that rack over the cattails. You could see him moving around and coming in my direction. I'd lose sight of him quite a bit. But from 75 yards, it's probably a good half hour, maybe more, maybe closer to an hour before dark when he got up. And when he got 75 yards to under my tree where I could shoot him, it was about closing time when I shot him. So it took him that long to get that 75 yards. So what chance does one of those guys that's 200 yards back have? Getting to your
Right.
point about, how do I know that's night sign? Because every one of these I shoot at the edge of darkness, within 100 yards of their bed. So that was it in a nutshell. I spined him, dropped him. What's funny too is I went out there with Dave, and Dave hunted on the other side of him. We surrounded him, and Dave had to walk 75 yards out of there to a field, and he was going to meet me in that field. So I come out to that field, and there's no Dave. And I was a little early, so I waited. No Dave, no Dave. It gets darker and darker and darker. So the other hunters are gone. So I yell over, in the darkness, Dave! Because I'm like, what is taking him so long? I get no answer, and it's dead silent out there. And you can imagine, I'm antsy to go get this buck,
Right.
So finally I walk over, and Dave's not at his tree. Well, I didn't get all the way to the tree. I got like close to it and yelled his name. No answer, and it's dead silent. So I figured he went to the truck earlier or something. Maybe he shot something. I don't know. So I go back to the truck. It's not that hard. I mean, you go to that field, and then you go to a path. I mean, like I said, it was kind of overlooked right next to the road, kind of. So I go back to the truck, and Dave ain't at the truck. I'm like, what the hell? So I go back out there, and I yell his name. Now that everybody's gone, the whole parking lot's empty, and it's getting pretty late now. And I yell his name, and you could probably hear it for a half mile, and I get no answer. And I got this eerie feeling that he was dead underneath his tree stand.
Oh, man.
And I ran out to his tree, thinking he fell out of the tree stand. He's not under the tree. You can see he hunted in the tree. You can see the marks and stuff, and he's not there. I'm like, what the hell? So I walk back to the truck again. He still ain't there. And that was flip phone days, and
Right.
phone on him, and so I'm like waiting, and I'm like, what the hell, and all of a sudden I hear something on the road, and I walk over, and here he is coming up the road, and he goes, I don't know, I took a wrong turn. Came up, he walked like a mile through private property, all the way to the next road, left his stuff in the cattails, and walked all the way around until he found me. And you guys probably seen the video. I took video of him when he came up, and I was telling him that I got the buck, and he was just like all befuzzled because he didn't,
Right.
lost or whatever, but kind of took my moment away.
Right. Yeah. A roller coaster of emotions right there. For sure. Well, that's awesome. We're going to go ahead and move on to one of your more recent bucks here.
That one probably most of the people remember.
Yeah.
That buck I hunted for quite a while, but he was a very, very frustrating buck because he lived in an ocean of cattails. And I mean solid cattails, no trees or nothing. So I had like an island or two I could hunt him on. And I had pressure from other people too. And he kind of had the number on those spots. And he wasn't coming into them. If he came into them, he was swinging downwind. I put a camera on the main island, and I would notice that he would be there on the days I'm not and know when I'm there, kind of thing. And then he would disappear after I hunt there. So I was figuring he was coming in from downwind. He's smelling it to see if there's, people there. because it was a danger spot, and you just couldn't kill them. And I was trying to find a way to kill them, and I was struggling with it. And I really wanted to, just try to get him off the ground. But cattails are, like 10 feet tall. How do you shoot in that stuff,
Right.
And I was thinking about making a blind or something in the cattails, but there's a million trails. And then there's like a couple open areas that were kind of funnelish. And I was thinking maybe I could get something in there. And I was thinking about studying a map of the area where it was the tightest and stuff, because you can't see it from ground level. Yeah. But looking at, Google Earth and stuff, I could kind of see where, okay, where the water comes in tight and stuff. Here's a spot where he has to go through something narrow. Looks like there's an opening. Maybe if I came in with a boat, got in here and got up on the edge on this wind, I could do it. So I went out there to scout again, and I was really just in a struggle to find some way to kill this deer. And that's something I go through a lot, that I don't know if other people do that. But a big thing that kills these deer is it gets in my head, there's got to be a way, and I'll just keep working at it and working at it and working at it until I figure it out. And I got out there and I was working around, and I hit this spot, and I had been to this spot before. No excuses, but I didn't recognize it till this day. I came up on this grassy, like hill, if you want to say it, just higher ground, like a foot higher than the cattails, right? Of dirt that was just grass. And on the far edge of the grass was a patch of willow brush. And I walked over to the willow brush, and I hadn't done that before. I always just walked across that grass if I'd gone back that far. But this is a very remote area where you got to go through a lot of water and cattails to get to this area from any direction. So I come up to this grass, and I see the willow brush, and I go over there and look in there, and the willow brush is just tore up with rubs. A lot of these branches this big around are just twisted off. And there's probably 50, 75 worn in beds in there. And it just struck me that, the timing thing of it. The willow brush loses its leaves in October. And bucks, aren't hard antlered until September. It leaves a pretty tight window for all that sign. Because when the willow brush loses its leaves, those deer aren't bedding out in the open sun. They're moving into the cattails.
Right.
So I follow the trail out of there, and the trail goes into this real deep water, cattails, and goes about 75 yards to this little point of fingers or brush that goes up onto some private land a little further back. But in the brush, there's one tree about this big around that I could get up about as high as I could reach, put a stand and shoot over the brush.
Yeah.
And hunt that. And like I said, I've been hunting this deer for several years. So this, I really felt like I had a way to kill him, but getting to this spot would be very difficult. The way I came out scouting, I walked like 2 miles through knee-deep water. So I knew that was kind of out of the option. I mean, you're talking a few hours to get there, right? And a few hours to get out. But coming from where the deer was, I'd have to walk through the deer, from the public access through the deer to get to the stand. But I could come along to skate the land border, to one way through some deep water and cattails.
Okay.
But no deer trails or anything. It was just like really thick and heavy. And me and Ricky went out there
just the circle around it to come in from a different access point.
So
okay,
me and Ricky went in there in the summer and cut an access trail through the cattails as they're growing to get there, and started it about 20 yards into the cattails so nobody would see it. And that year, I wanted to get there as soon as possible. I knew that buck was bedding there early season, very early season, September, early October. I thought there was like a 3-4 week window that buck's bedding there. So I got there the very first day that we had a brisk north wind, because that's what I needed, was a brisk wind so they don't hear me sloshing nearby through the water to get back there. And it had to be north for it to work for me. So the first north brisk wind I got out there, I hunted, and when I got into the tree, I climbed up, put my stand up, and I don't think I was there 15, 20 minutes, and a fawn got up 15 yards from me, bedded. Never even knew I set up the stand and stuff right next to it. And then the doe popped up in front of me about 20, 25 yards. And then while they're feeding, I hear something coming out of that willow brush in my direction, hit that water, and it's sloshing towards me from that buck bedding. And the doe, meanwhile, is coming straight at me through a trail that goes right to the base of my tree stand. And remember, I'm only up as high as I can reach. And she comes underneath me and gets right into the opening underneath me, and she's a few feet away. And she spins her head around and sees the first climbing stick on the tree and stares at it, locked on it, looks up at the next one, looks up at me and goes, oh, and freaks out and drops and blows, turns around, runs back where she came from, and gets between me and what I think is the buck coming, and just starts blowing and blowing and blowing and blowing, blowing. And meanwhile, I started hearing the sloshing going further and further away. It went out deeper into the swamp. Whatever was coming in took that as a warning. So the very next day, I went back out there and I hunted it one more time just in case that buck came in again the next day. But he wasn't that stupid and he didn't. And then I did what most people won't. I left it alone for a whole year because I didn't want to blow that spot. I didn't want to blow my opportunity.
Sure.
So I just let it settle down, left it alone. And the next year came along, and the very first brisk north wind we had, which I think was the 5th day of the season, I went all the way back out there again. Exact same scenario, setup, everything. The biggest difference was no does got up around me. But I still heard something come up out of the red brush about the same time, come through the cattails. If you watch the video, I even point out where I think it's going to come from. Popped out right where it was supposed to. Walked up, and I almost blew that hunt. Because when the buck was coming into my left side, when he got to about, 15, 20 yards, I pulled the bow back when he got behind a bush a little too hard, and there's a little string stop, and it was dead silent. I made a little click, and when it did that, the buck just locked and stopped.
Crazy.
Yeah, I thought he was going to run because his head spun around. You can't see it on the video, but the video won't film through trees, but your sight can see through trees, pieces of it, right?
Yep.
And you see that deer spin its head around. It's just staring at me as I'm, you can't see me. It's staring my direction as I'm at full draw aiming. And I don't know how long it was. It felt like it was 17 hours, but I think it was probably 2 minutes or 3 minutes or something. I sat there at full draw, and I'm thinking he's going to run. And I'm thinking when he runs, he's going to run back where he came from, and he's going to stop just before he gets to the cattails and look back. And when he does, I'm going to drill him because that was only 25 yards to the cattails. So I'm sitting there like this, but he flicks his tail, starts walking again, and starts coming right back through the opening that I'm aiming at. And when he does that, I don't want to stop him now. Because once that thing's heard a foreign noise and I make another one,
right,
he's probably not stopping. He's going to bolt.
Yeah, he's on edge.
Right. So I'm following him thinking I can't miss at 10 yards. And I'm following him. And he's so big and lengthy body-wise that I think he was moving a little faster than I thought. And when I shot, he was walking faster than the arrow. And I hit him a little far back and I got him in the guts. He hunched up, ran around this bush, and stopped running. I couldn't see him, but I could hear him moving. And I waited for a while. I stopped hearing anything. I snuck out of the tree and snuck out of there as quiet as I could, went home, had a very sleepless night. And then I got Scott over with his dog. And we went out, put the dog on, and the dog kind of ran right to it. It actually had gotten up out of its bed on the other side of that bush, but that bush, it was like within 20 yards of where I was in that tree. It probably heard me, even though I was being super quiet, come out of there and move. And It probably got about 300 yards, but the dog ran right to it, and it wasn't. It looked like it hadn't been dead very long at all. And
What was your, how long did you guys wait?
overnight,
Okay.
yeah, so a good 13 hours, I think.
Real quick here, Dan. We got a question here. Hey, Dan, what's the threshold / minimum gust for a brisk wind? In your opinion?
Geez, I don't know. The kind of wind that makes noise when it's blowing. I mean, everything's moving. That's a brisk wind to me. So I don't know, it's probably like 15 miles an hour, but I don't know what I would put on it for a number. I would just say the wind that's making stuff blow and move around. That's going to be noisy. It's going to be distracting. Yeah, that's a good question, though. I don't know what determines brisk. I know my brisk is that the stuff is blowing and making enough cover noise that the deer's not going to hear me.
I think it's an iced tea.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Let's bring this buck back up here one more time. And again, this is a buck you didn't score, correct?
Correct. Probably 160s.
Yeah. What did you age him at roughly?
He was 7.5 years old. We cut
7.5.
And I knew that already from pictures.
That's impressive.
He was actually so big. We should have weighed him. 4 grown men couldn't carry that thing with the legs tight around a pole.
Well, when you see those wrinkles in the neck like that, that's usually a pretty good indication. You know, when you get those crease lines like that, those rolls, he's even got a little bit of a double chin going on there.
Kind of like Ricky.
Go ahead. So if you were to say the one thing, or like one time a year, if you're going to get aggressive, would you say it's early season when bucks are maybe on summer patterns, or the rut? When are you going to be most aggressive on a specific buck if you are aware of them in the summertime?
I would say I don't know anything but aggressive.
Okay, for anybody else,
I'm timidly aggressive. I don't think you cannot hunt them aggressively.
Sure.
I think if you do, you're not killing them. Period. Rut, no matter what. Rut, pre-rut, late season. I think that you're I don't know how to say it, but you're aggressively standoffish. How's that?
Sure.
Because literally, anytime you hunt them, it's about making your move when you can. Like being overly aggressive would have been like the wind's blowing at them, I'm going in there anyways. You know what I mean? Or I could maybe get away with this, but I probably won't, but I'm going to try it anyways. To me, aggressive was waiting for the right wind that was, a heavy wind, and it was out of the north, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't make those moves, you don't kill those bucks. Those bucks, when they get to be 5-6 years old, they are, especially on public land, they are so in tune with somebody coming after them that when you go in there and you make a move like you say, well, I don't want to spook this deer out of here. It's the only one I got to hunt. And if I spook him, I won't have nothing for the whole season. So I'm just going to go right here. And maybe he'll come to here, maybe not. And then I'll move a little further the next time, which is what you hear from a lot of people. I hear that all the time.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And if you do that, that's like slapping that thing on the ass and saying, here I come, because he's going to smell where you were. We think with our eyes. They think with their nose. That is literally slapping them on the ass and saying, I'm coming for you. And you're going to get a response. And when I want that deer to smell me, if he bends his head over and he smells me on the ground, I want an arrow to sail through his lungs at the same time.
Sure.
That's what I want. So I'm aggressive with timing and smarts. But you got to, when you go in for the kill, you go in for the kill.
So with that timing and that smarts, we're talking about wind direction, probably first and foremost, right? Yeah. How about weather fronts?
I don't know if that works much for anything.
Like if a cold front, if they're predicting a cold front, say 3 days out or whatever, and the wind is also going to be right, would it be worth waiting, even if the wind was right 2 days prior, but now a cold front, and we're talking late October? Just throwing out a scenario.
When you get to within 100 yards of their bedding, it doesn't matter if it's 110 degrees out or if it's a cold front.
It's true.
They're going to move.
Yeah.
And I recently, paid attention to those, I can't think of their names, but those deer research guys. We had them on the show once with Jeremy. But they did a study, a radio color study, and said, cold fronts don't make much of a difference.
Okay. Now, in terms of overall movement or daytime movement?
They said if in terms of kills, it made a difference.
Okay.
But it made a difference because of how many people were hunting on cold front days.
Oh, that makes sense.
But
that makes
as far as
sense.
deer movement on their radio collars, they said it didn't make much of a difference. And
Okay.
I kind of see that. I mean, I shoot these things. It's hot out. It's cold out. It's all kinds of stuff. I don't know. I don't seem to think that matters too much. I wait for weather for certain reasons. Like when it's raining, I can go to spots that have crunchy leaves. The leaves are no longer crunchy. When it's windy, I can go to spots where deer can see you moving maybe. Maybe they can get an eyeball on you when you're sneaking in. But the movement of other stuff is going to kind of let you get away with something.
Yeah.
That's how I use the weather. Wait for that wind direction. But I'm really aggressive about killing them. But it's not as aggressive as you think. It's a timing thing. But you can't just go in a little ways, or you got to go in for the kill. Because a lot, you look at these bucks, the ones that you can shoot 2 and 3 year old deers by backing off. They'll make more mistakes. When they get to 6 or 7 on public land, those deer are making very, very few mistakes. That's a once in a lifetime buck for most people. A guy like me is doing that on a regular basis because I'm not letting them know I'm coming. I'm going in for the kill when I go in for the kill and not before that. So like when you hunt a specific buck, if you're hunting, say a buck that you really want to kill and it's a 40 acre public piece, it's a little strip. There's one other guy that hunts it a little bit and the deer is mainly living on private. There's 2 bedding areas on that 40 that you think that guy doesn't know about, and that buck might be living in those 2 bedding areas at a certain timing. You try to figure that timing out, and it's 2 hunts, 1 year. And that's aggressive to me. Yeah. To other people who are like, I can't hunt a single deer on a 40 acre piece. Well, that's because you think you got to be there all the time.
Right.
I mean, look at these deer I'm killing. I mean, look at the Rome Legend. Well, I hunt them 3 times, but I was hunting them for 3 years. Look at this buck we were just talking about. I hunted him 3 times, 2 seriously, 1 just in case he came and did the same thing a second day.
Right.
And well, I hunted him before that too. That buck, I hunted on the islands and stuff for him too. But literally, in the 7 years I was hunting him, I probably hunted him 10 times. Wow. Hopping around in different spots. Because there's only so many places you could get at him. And it really ain't going to do you no good to just randomly hop through the woods. It had to be spots, specifically setups, where he's going to move that short window of time to kill him.
That makes sense. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of guys out there that feel like more time in the stand is everything.
Well,
that hours in the stand.
I agree to a point.
Opportunity.
I agree to a point.
But maybe not for a specific buck.
I think hunting, 10-hour days is stupid. You're wasting time. You could be scouting. You could be doing other things. I would rather hunt, 4 days in a row for 4 hours, or you know what I mean. But
sure.
I'm going to hunt that window of time in a specific spot. But I'm not only hunting 2 times a year.
Right.
I've got a bunch of bucks lined up and a bunch of spots lined up, and I'm hopping around from spot to spot. And if I run out of spots or bucks, I'll go find one. I'll go into a property, I'll figure out where I think they're bedding, and I'll move in and set up and see what happens. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's maybe my scouting finds something that's mediocre.
Yeah.
At best. Maybe it finds something great, and now I'm on to a new buck. You know what I mean? But I'm always hunting. I'm putting lots of hours in stand, but I'm not burning up hours on a buck that all I'm going to do is drive him off the property.
Yeah.
I'm not going to blow my chance. I'm going to use patience and timing. Like I said, I'm very aggressive to some people, but if you look at overall how much I hunt these bucks, it's pretty laid back.
All good stuff. Lots of very interesting information. And, I feel like it's something that, like I just mentioned before, I was in that wheelhouse of years ago. I was anyways, of spending that hours in stand was going to equal success. And what I've found now over the last 10 plus years or whatever, that's not necessarily the case, and that choosing the right wind and conditions and things and just kind of using the knowledge that you've gained throughout your scouting, and that is going to lead to more success than actually hours in stand. And just that, like you said before, it's a timing thing.
Yep.
So, well, Dan, we're hitting that hour and a half mark here. Is there anything else you want to touch on at all, or?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah, I'm just looking to see if we missed any recent comments here or questions.
I seen Dave was on there.
Yeah,
Dave. He helped drag that last buck out.
I did. I did highlight the one comment there. Here's another one here from Dave. So if you don't think an experienced guy gets the adrenaline dump, he does. Yeah, and then he also had mentioned about dragging that thing out. So
yeah. Dave has helped me out a lot over the years. He helped me get Rat Slayer's last buck out too, and that was hell. That was way back in a swamp.
I can't imagine there's been too many easy drags out of the swamp over the years.
Oh, sometimes. The 400-pound slob, I shot it right next to the road, right next to the parking lot. I could see my truck.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, we want to thank you guys for tuning into another episode of the Beast Report. For those of you going out turkey hunting this week or in the upcoming weeks here, good luck to you. Enjoy yourselves out in the outdoors. And we'll be back next week with an all-new episode of the Beast Report. Right, Dan?
Yep. See you guys.
All right. Till next time.